Tonight we conclude our local series looking at the Italian Americans and how much they contribute to our way of life here in Western Massachusetts. This is all in conjunction with the just concluded PBS series, The Italian Americans, and our local reports are supported by a grant from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Tonight we hear from local writer Bruce Watson, author of Sacco and Vanzetti, The Men, the Murders, and the Judgment of Mankind. Watson participated in the PBS National Series, and he talked with us about the prejudices Italian immigrants faced in this country 100 years ago.
Yeah, we think now, some of the stereotypes of mafia still persist, but they were very much stronger then. And the Italians had started coming over to America in big numbers in the 1890s, especially to the Northeast. And there were already stories of a Black Hand Society and underground groups and mafia, the beginnings of that. And the gangster stereotype of the Italian gangster was very strong. And I discovered a remarkable thing in my research. I discovered someone had written about the Italians and how their strange food, how they would actually take this stuff called spaghetti, and they would slurp it into their mouths, and I thought, wow, we have come a long way, because everybody eats spaghetti now, but that was new, everything was new then.
Sacco and Vanzetti, these are simple men, a shoemaker, a fishmonger. Mm-hmm. They are political radicals, anarchists, admittedly. They're accused, convicted of a double murder involved in a robbery of a shoemaking plant, taking the payroll. Evidence against them seems to be flimsy to non-existent. They're convicted, though, and sentenced to death in really what I think most legal scholars today say was not much of a trial.
The trial especially is, the guilt and innocence of Sacco and Vanzetti will never be determined. I think that if you look at it overall, the only thing you can conclude absolutely without a doubt is that they deserved a second trial, that there was a great deal of prejudice in their trial. Some of it against them as anarchists, because anarchists were the terrorists of their times, and they confessed their anarchism during the trial for legal reasons. And much more of it for their Italian, basically for being Italian, for fitting that stereotype of the gangster. And they were both in court. They were in a cage, which was not unique to their trial. That was true of capital crimes. There was an iron bars, not in front of them, but all around behind. Policemen marched them into the courtroom each day. They looked very guilty. And then, unfortunately, both of them shouted out during the trial, each one at a policeman, another at a witness. And the jury was just 8 or 10 feet off to their left. And the jury convicted them very quickly, disregarding almost every alibi and much other evidence. And I have to conclude part of it was anarchism. Part of it might have been some of the evidence, but a big part was they just looked like they could have done it.
And the judge in the case, Judge Thayer, I think it was, probably today would be asked to recuse himself. He had spoken out quite a bit, not specifically to Sacco and Vanzetti, but about his concerns about radicals, mm-hmm. and also I think at times had said some things about the growing Italian immigrant community.
Well, Judge Webster Thayer was not the model that you would want for a Massachusetts judge. However, he was considered at the time to be fairly upright. And when he ran the trial, he ran it what appeared to be fair, and yet in the courtroom. And yet during the trial, during lunches, he would often say to reporters who were rather flabbergasted, "You wait till you see what I do when I give my directions. I'll show these anarchists no one can run my court." It was more about anarchism for him than Italians. And then later, after what certainly would not be true today, is that he handled all of the appeals based on evidence, and he, of course, denied them all. And then at the very end, when some more comments about anarchism had come out, very prejudicial comments, the defense finally filed a motion for a new trial based on a prejudicial judge. And who sat in judgment of that? Judge Thayer. Judge Thayer sat, and he said, "I've never been prejudiced." So that shows the farcical level to which it came.
And he had requested that he be on this trial, which, again, not only does he end up judging himself, mm-hmm. but he had asked to be there to be the judge in the first place, which, again, fascinating circumstance.
Yeah, the original trial, he had actually requested, because he was a very staunch anti-anarchist. He was terrified by Bolshevism, as he called it, and other things that might come into the... Anarchism was very different from Bolshevism, but he didn't know that. Think about that. He was just afraid of radicalism and very eager to do what he could to lock up all radicals. And he requested the trial for that reason.
As you've said, the debate continues and probably will forever. It's hard to imagine how anything could ever come out this mm-hmm. late that would tell us their guilt or innocence. When they're arrested, police said Vanzetti was carrying a pistol. identical to the missing gun that had been held by the guard killed in the shoe factory robbery. I don't know that they were ever able to specifically say it was the gun, but it certainly was the same model. That seems to connect him to the robbery, or at least to whomever committed the crime, and that really was kind of the crucial part of it, wasn't it, to some extent?
That debate goes on forever. That's less convincing to me because there was all sorts of the machinations of this trial go on, and that particular gun had been traced to a gun shop. And the guard who didn't have it on him when he was killed had taken it in to be repaired. He never picked it up. It goes on. More confusing more interesting is Sacco's gun, which was tested during the trial and test fired. And there were 4 bullets found in one of the guards. One of the bullets was traced to Sacco's gun, and no one ever asked the question, well, if he fired 4 bullets, why would only one be connected? So Sacco's gun was more incriminating, and yet I think more dubious.
When they are convicted, it really sets off a firestorm in this country and around the world.
Especially around the world. The outcry was greater. It started to fall after they were convicted. Their lawyer was not a very good lawyer, but he was a very good publicist, and he sent this around to labor and radical circles around the world. And by that fall, they had just begun their jail terms. There was a bomb went off in the American ambassador in Paris, in his house, and protests began all around the world. And these continued for the next 6 years until on the day of their execution, there were protests in every major capital in the world, from Tokyo, Johannesburg, all across South America, and some here in America, especially in New York.
It was fascinating to look back and find that it became something of a cause for liberal elements in this country. And one of the names I found of people who campaigned for Sacco and Vanzetti to be freed or at least get a new trial, later Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter took up their cause.
Yes, Frankfurter was a Harvard law professor at that time, and he heard his law students talking about it, both pro and con, and he became involved. And about 4 months before they were executed, when they were just before they were sentenced, he wrote a very influential article in Atlantic Monthly detailing all of the dubious aspects of the case, all of the prejudice and other things, and it became a book as well. And he went to bat for them very strongly.
How did this case impact the situation for Italian Americans, which was already fairly uncomfortable in this country?
Yeah. I think it was a morality play and a staunch lesson of what could happen if you got out of line. Certainly, only a small percentage of Italian Americans were anarchists or radicals, and yet many were discontent with the situations, with the low-level jobs that they were given, with the discrimination and all sorts of things. And yet the case of Sacco and Vanzetti suggested if you push it too far, the powers that be might just take this route. And so I think it probably silenced many people. I guarantee you that every Italian American growing up in the decades after, for at least 2 or 3 decades, heard the story of Sacco and Vanzetti at their kitchen table or their dinner table or somewhere.
Very broadly generalized, Italian Americans had felt some success in the labor movement, in strikes here in Massachusetts and other places a few years before this. Now, this case, what did it do to the Italian American community? How did they watch this case? What did it do in terms of, did it galvanize them? Did it quiet them, silence them, as you may have mentioned a minute ago?
I would say it divided them, because there were a number of conservative Italian organizations and newspapers that were very they weren't necessarily anti-Sacco and Vanzetti, but they were certainly against anarchists, and they were certainly against people who refused to assimilate in any way. There's always that drive in American history to assimilate, to fit in, to be like everybody else. And Sacco and Vanzetti wanted no part of that. And so this was a lesson to them as well. So it divided the community to a great deal for a while. And yet, in a sense, it also united them, because here they were. They couldn't have been more Italian. And they were held up as these gangsters and probably innocent. So,
as you mentioned, there was prejudice not only because they were Italian American, but perhaps initially more so because of their political beliefs and all the fears about radicals and what was happening around the world at that time in terms of revolution. In terms of our court system, in terms of how we deal with the accused, was there a lasting impact and lesson in this case, do you think, or is that going too far too soon?
In terms of Massachusetts, I think there was. It didn't happen right away, but we no longer have the death penalty in this state. I mean, these were men who went to the electric chair, and As the doubts mounted, the case certainly did not end with their execution. The doubts continued to pour out. Their letters came out that seemed beautifully eloquent in their own defense. There were other stories of other cases of other possible perpetrators of the crime. An entire case was laid out against them. And so the execution of Sacco and Vanzetti began to look pretty bad. And I believe it was in the late 30s, but somewhere around there, Massachusetts outlawed the death penalty. There have been other manifestations of whether or not a judge in a trial should be the judge who listens to the appeals and other things too.
Bruce Watson, author of Sacco and Vanzetti, The Men, the Murders, and the Judgment of Mankind. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you.